So, hey, we're here at Hook. I'm here with my good friends Hozer and Jell-O, who you may know better as Raven One and the Fighter Pilot podcast. A lot of folks on the comments have asked, hey, do you know Hozer or do you know Jell-O? And I'm here to tell you that I do, as a matter of fact. And we know each other from our lives before you guys knew who we were. So you and I were together CAG 7, you were the CAG LSO, and we did a med Gulf cruise. Were we the first on the scene after Desert Storm? Because the oil fires were still burning.
It was still called Desert Storm.
Yes, we were still technically Desert Storm. We go back to the ditch, go north, and now we get the order, or we get the heads up as we exit the med. We're not going straight, we're going to turn right.
But it was a no-notice thing. Oh, you're going to do this in the winter above the Arctic Circle. The flight deck is slick from months of operating, and so as a CAG LSO, I'm thinking, okay, the deployment's winding down, we're heading back, and then oh no, you're going to go to the North Atlantic again above the Arctic Circle, and you're going to be waving pitching deck mobilus.
Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Wizard.
Mr. Wizard. So I remember one mission in particular. I was flying with a guy named Grinch Brophy, who we remember well. He went on to be a teach at Fallon. He was back when they called it NSOC. He was there. And so Grinch and I were flying. We did a sortie over Scotland, DAC'd against the Brits, and then we come back and we realize that the weather really is bad. It's really bad. Pitching decks, airplanes are icing up in Marshall. We kind of had a mutiny in the holding stack. We sorted that out, but we get down below the layer there, I think it was right at 800 feet, and look down and it's Beaufort scale 10, right? We had our bags on, but you're like, there's no way that if we have to eject, we're going to survive in that sea state. So you're working mobilus and giving us the sugar calls. So as I remember it, it took us 4 looks to get aboard. The third look, and I remember your voice very distinctly because as you can hear his meter now, it's very calming. So imagine him.
It's an important trait.
It is an important trait when you're CAG paddles. So again, he's working moveless, right? This is the manually operated visual landing system, right? Landing aid system, moveless. Because the lens cannot keep up, the automatic lens cannot keep up once you get, what's the pitch rate that it doesn't keep up with?
I think it was
2
6
degrees?
feet. I think it was a measure of ramp motion.
Yeah, but it gets unreliable, so he's got to control the ball. And so this is why you have to have a good eye. But on our third look, I remember that Grinch is flying on, and it was, decks down, don't chase it, decks up, fly your needles. And then at one point you said a little power, and he came on with a huge burst of power. And we had a long bolter. And I remember you said, easy with it. That's the only time I heard your voice intonation sort of go up a couple of octaves. Long bolter, hit the tanker, the S3 tanker, 500 pounds of give just to go around one more time. Basket moving all over the place. It was hard to hit the tanker. It wasn't easy to hit the tanker. So after we get the gas, we're turning down, and I'm like, what happened? And he said, I saw the screws. Right? He saw the propellers of the Eisenhower come out of the water as it went bow down. So that's how rough it was. And last look, got aboard, taxi one wire. The fun wasn't over because we had to get towed out of the wires, right? So I don't know what the interval was between airplanes, but it was like 2 minutes at least,
yes.
Instead of 1 minute. So hook up to a tractor, get dragged out of the landing area, park, chained, and it's still kind of hairy to get out of the airplane. Get down to the ready room, sit in the chair, and I'm just exhausted, and so was Grinch, obviously. And I just said to the skipper, I'm like, if I didn't have to do that again, that'd be fine. I think I'm good for this North Atlantic stuff. So because of his measured cadence and I with the moveless, I am with you today. But now that we're here in person, I just wanted to recount that and thank him in person for...
My pleasure, Mooch.
Just another day in Paddle's life. So, Jell-O, Aiello, who you know from the Fighter Pilot podcast, he and I cruised together on GW.
That's right.
So that was your Nugget cruise.
I was a brand new lieutenant in the fleet.
You were with VFA 86.
Right.
The Sidewinders.
That's right.
Right. And so were you brand new, or how long had you been in the squadron?
So I reported to that squadron in the fall of '96, and we deployed in the fall of '97.
Right.
So I was a year in, basically. Yeah.
So I had done the previous cruise on America as a department head in 102. Boomer was the DCAG, and then he flew up to be CAG. He's like, hey, Mooch, come be my OPSO, and I needed the work to make 05, and so it worked out pretty good. And so same air wing, and now a new ship, what we called back then a battle group commander, a guy you might have heard of named Mike Mullen, later went on to be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He's in that very famous Bin Laden Situation Room photo with all the gang there. And what I remember is we thought we were going to do kind of a med cruise, and we were in Haifa. And I remember that Admiral Mullen joked that he found out we were sortying to the Gulf when Christian Amanpour told him.
So we pulled out of Haifa, and that night on the ship's TV, which wasn't very good at the time, but we were watching CNN, and they said, oh, President Clinton had ordered the George Washington to go to the Persian Gulf. And we said, oh, really? And then all of a sudden the ship's, the captain's piper, it comes on, and one MC like, attention on the George Washington, yeah, our schedule's changed, and we'll be going through the Gulf tomorrow, or the Strait, I should say. And so we had one port visit in the Med, and then we went through the Strait, and then, or not the Strait, but the canal. Yeah, thank you. And then we spent several months in the Persian Gulf, and then we hit, I want to say it was it Cannes, France on the way home.
Yeah.
But otherwise, yeah, we spent a lot of time in there because at the time, the inspectors of the Iraqi nuclear program had been kicked out. And so President Clinton had said, all right, well, we've got to show them that we mean business.
What I remember is the Tanker X was the hairiest part of the mission. In fact, we lost, 2 Marines. We lost the XO of the Marine Corps squadron, who had a midair with his wingman in the pattern. Just not a war, not getting shot up by SAMs or anything, but just rendezvousing on the tanker at night. So here you are, a Nugget, heavy tankers playing crack the whip with upwards of sometimes 10 guys on either wing. So how did that feel?
So what I remember is we have this plan, it seems like, where we get airborne, we go to a tanker, and there's all these other airplanes, but wait your turn, and once you get your gas, then you go in country, and something may or may not happen, and for the most part it didn't, and then you get gas 1 or 2 more times, and then you come out, you get gas maybe 1 more time on the way out, and then you come back to the ship. But I was so new, I was just like, yes sir, that's what we do. But I do remember thinking, this is dangerous. And to your point, then there was one night where it was the Marine XO, and as I understand it, it was one of the other pilots who hit him.
Yes.
And he survived, but the XO did not. He was the father of a couple young children, and we had a ceremony for him on the ship. And I remember standing there, and I didn't know him real well, but I knew him. And I remember thinking, this is serious business. People die, and this is consequential. And so that was kind of my somewhat trial by fire, even though it wasn't for me, but just being so close to it and thinking, this is real stuff.
So I was called into the flag ops spaces. T.R. Raines was the Admiral's Air Ops officer. He's like, Mooch, come in here. There's somebody on the radio talking about Eagle, whatever their Modex was. Were they the 400 series, the 300 series? Eagle 301. And so I keep listening to the radio. Eagle, they say it's Eagle 301. And I finally, and Mullen is standing there as well. Admiral Mullen's standing there as well. I remember going, that's not Eagle, that's T-Bolt. They're saying T-Bolt, right? And so this was VMFA 251, who I'd also cruised with on America, our Marine Corps squadron. And having a Marine squadron in the air wing is always a good thing. And we're just talking to a F-35 squadron, Marine squadron that's going on Lincoln. It's the first C squadron that's going on Lincoln, Marines, out of Miramar. And I'm just thinking back to the T-Bolt days. Those guys were supermoto. They're super tight because they're a family, and the bond, and it's so unique to have a Marine tactical squadron going to sea, so that sort of brings out elements of them bonding. And so when they have a mishap like that, it's just the tragedy is heightened that much more. What did you do after that? After that tour, where'd you go after that?
So I stayed in CAG 1 with VFA 86 and did another cruise on the John F. Kennedy, which was the carrier my wife and I actually got married on the flight deck in port. So that was fun. And then after that went to Top Gun, and then was in Fallon for a couple of years, and then went to Lemoore for a couple tours.
Okay.
So, and then continued my career.
We did Fleet Week.
In '98.
Yes.
Yes.
You did Fleet Week.
Fleet Week in New York. The towers were still standing. So we've got pictures of us in front of the towers 3 years before they fell.
Right.
And in fact, as we're recording this, it's right at the 20th anniversary. And so my wife and I were there just a couple weeks before we were married, actually. And
So I found that picture. So I just did my 9/11 episode. Where were the fighters on 9/11? And I found that picture of the Kennedy cruising under the Twin Towers with the sailors spelling out, "I love New York." And it just struck me as that's my representation of never forget, because that was such a fantastic Fleet Week. And as we remember, the Intrepid Foundation folks came out beforehand, and we did that air power demo for them. I was the narrator for the air power demo. And I remember Pav Smears had that, he tried to go to blower in the B on the cat shot, and one of the blowers didn't light, and it looked like it had a compressor stall. And they were all like, "Oh my God, that's just like in Top Gun." The guests from the Intrepid Foundation were just freaking out about the fact that Paps had lost a motor on the stroke. But you know, by the time you get to New York, your dance card is full. Like, go see the Yankees in Steinbrenner's box, go to this private club with Mariah Carey, go play golf at Baltusrol. And so my kinship as a function of that Fleet Week is very intense for New York. And so as I was doing my research for that episode, I found that image, you know, and I used it in the episode. So, you know, and that was my last at sea period. That Fleet Week was my, then I transferred to the academy and became an instructor at the Naval Academy. You know.
And for me, I was still relatively new and was just enjoying all the experiences. And so, yeah, my wife and I don't know how well you can see that, but we found ourselves there in New York. And for me, it was my very first time ever in New York. And so to be able to see the towers that we knew of and not thinking anything else, right? It's a part of Americana. That's awesome. And so, yeah, little did we know how the world would change.
Hozer, where did you go after the CAG Pedals job?
I stayed in the VFA 131 that was in the Air Wing and did my department head tour. And then I did an exchange tour with the Air Force, came back to Cecil as XOCO of VFA 105, and we deployed on Enterprise, and now Southern Watch, of course, was a thing. And we were there in '98 and did Desert Fox. After that, came back and...
so that was the war that we planned.
Exactly, we got to fly it. Thank you so much.
We handed you our con-ops and all of our hard work.
You literally did.
We really did, I'm not kidding.
I just changed the numbers of the airplanes and we went and did it. We flew up to Oceana, our new home, and then for me, War College, and all roads lead to the Pentagon, and that's where I wrapped it up.
Okay, but speaking of the Pentagon, you were in the Pentagon on 9/11.
On 9/11.
So what was that all about? What do you remember?
Beautiful day, and it was just after a wonderful summer, and someone said, "Hey, look at New York." So I go look at a TV, and you see the North Tower is on fire, and I thought it was an accident. That was my initial thought. I went back to my desk and said, "Hey, come back here." So now the second airplane has flown into the second tower, and now we all know what's happened. And I remember turning to my boss saying, "This means war, and we're next." Went back to my desk. And just trying to process all this. And then suddenly a shockwave comes through the office. I bounce in my seat, and you hear this sound. And I knew immediately what had happened.
Really?
And so we're...
That was your first thought, was jet had hit?
Yes.
Okay.
And so we're in Pukaville, so you kind of stand up and look at each other. And, okay, collect your stuff. Within minutes, you can smell jet fuel. And it was an orderly evacuation. It was like leaving a sporting event. It wasn't
freaking out.
There's none of that. The Pentagon is like a wheel, so you go to the hub of the wheel, and you can look down another corridor. And I could look down there, and I saw white smoke, and I saw my neighbor there. So okay, good, he's okay. We went outside, and black smoke, fuel-fed fire. We came across a 3-star admiral who was not our admiral, but he's just come across a leader. And he didn't know what to do either. And guys are running around, their shirt tails are out, no one's wearing a cover. We're just like, what's going on? And then you hear that thump. And this is what you've seen on film where the part of the building collapses. And he just said, disperse. So one of us had a car, and I took the Metro to the building, and so 4 of us piled in a car because the cop said, get out of here, another one's coming. And this must have been Flight 93. So we get in the car, and one of us had this brick, this mobile phone at the time, and we finally got through after a couple of hours. It was a 3-hour trek for us to go to Fairfax, where we lived, and just inching along the Shirley Highway. F-16s at 1,000 feet are screaming over there from Langley.
Yep.
And that night I found out that some of my shipmates in N51 were missing, and that meant the worst. And the next morning in my white uniform, I showed up at the Navy Annex up on the hill. Pentagon's still on fire, and was assigned to visit the family of Bob Dolan, who was one of my shipmates in N51, and be an escort officer. And so met the family and helped them out over the next several months. But we were burying guys into the next year, and it was a very, very emotional time.
So on a lighter note, let's talk about what we've done after we got out. So Hozer, you've become quite a well-known writer. You're very prolific. How did you get into writing, and where did the Raven 1 series come from?
After I retired in 2005, a friend said, you should write a book. And I said, oh, get out. He said, no, you've got stories. You should write a book. And I said, maybe I will. Maybe it's something for the kids. And so over a course of years, I would start and put it away for months and bring it back up. I finished Raven 1, and after 4 years, I finished it, and I knew I had something. You can just tell. And so what do? Well, I better call someone who knows, which is Ward Carroll, who had done the Punk trilogy. And so if you remember, we got on the phone, and,
yes.
and you were kind of showing me the ropes, say this is kind of what you got to do. We talked about agents and you this whole publishing thing. And so tried that and had some fits and starts. I met George Galderisi at the Naval Aviation Museum Foundation, who turned me on, and he had written some terrific thrillers, the rotary wing background. And he turned me on to Jeff Edwards, a retired sonarman chief, who had also written a trilogy, Surface Warfare, very good. And between those two, they pulled me along, and we published Raven 1 in 2014. And people liked it. It just took off, if I can use that euphemism. And so my editor, Linda Wasserman, she said, okay, you've written a book, now you have a full-time job, and you got to write another one. And of course, she was right.
Yeah.
I've written, finished the trilogy for Raven 1, and then a standalone, The Silver Waterfall, which is historical fiction about the Battle of Midway.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And so Jell-O, our mutual friend Buzz Snodgrass, when I was, I've co-hosted the Proceedings podcast at the Naval Institute, he's like, you got to talk to Jell-O Aiello. I'm like, yeah, I know Jell-O. And he's like, well, you guys got to connect. So we didn't connect for a while, and then finally, when my YouTube channel started taking off, I was like, now I need to connect with you. So where did the Fighter Pilot podcast come from, and how did that get to be the gigantic enterprise that it is now?
Well, thank you for that. I'm not sure it is, but I like to think so. So I was a guest on someone else's podcast about something completely unrelated, but we spent most of our time talking about military aviation. And it reminded me, as both of you know, that people love what we do. What's it like to be on a carrier, to sit on an ejection seat, to aerial refuel, to do these things that we do day in, day out? And so after that experience, I looked and I said, nobody's doing a podcast on military aviation. Somebody needs to, because I know there's an audience, there's a hunger for this information. And so I decided, well, until someone else does, I will. And so I had to wait a little while till I got out of the military, because while you're in, the military is going to have some say over what you can talk about or not. So in 2017, I'd been working towards releasing what became the Fighter Pilot podcast, but then I got hired by an airline. And so I had to work on that because I had to put food on the table. And so after the airline got me trained and I was ready, and it was the fall of 17, I said, okay, we're going to do this, but at this point, we got the holidays coming up, let's wait. And sure enough, on January 1st, 2018, the Fighter Pilot podcast was born with, I think it was 3 episodes on that day, 0, 1, and 2. And then we decided to go every 10 days. And we've been doing that ever since, 3 episodes a month. And we are in our 4th year. And I'm still having fun, which is good because it's a lot of work, but it is fun.
So you're doing the podcast, but also you've had a YouTube channel. So those are 2 different things, kind of. Can you explain to the audience what you consider the podcast and what you consider the YouTube channel? Because you also cross-post your YouTube or your podcast on YouTube with just like a thumbnail and the audio. But you've done dedicated, like I do on this channel, where you're talking, you're interviewing. You've had some smash hits, 2.5 million views, kind of a thing, right? So And you have almost 60,000 subscribers on your YouTube channel. So that's no minor shakes, right? So in your mind, what's the difference between the podcast and that medium and the YouTube channel?
Well, and that's a great question, Mooch, because YouTube is a platform for people, and if I may say it, feels like that's what you're doing. You're using it to get your message out, you're conveying information that people find very valuable, and you've grown very quickly, so I want to congratulate you publicly.
No lie. I mean,
Okay.
between Rick Beato and Jell-O, they gave me the sort of playbook that allowed me to skip the middle part. So
Yeah.
let me publicly...
So you when you reached out to me, I think you had 10,000 followers or subscribers, and I said, hey, here's some things to avoid, here's some things to do, and you shot past me. To your question, we use YouTube mainly as another place to consume the podcast. So we are primarily an audio-only show, but we put it on there with a little bouncing sound bar so that if that's the way you want to consume it, you can. But because I have it, I use it for other things. So I think even Hozer has helped me. We've done a discussion on different things that come up. You and I have done some other stuff that we keep kind of separate. But to your point about the 2.5 million, our biggest hit, if you will, was I reacted to one of the Top Gun Maverick trailers, and I used the opportunity to say, hey, this is what I see in this trailer. This is what I see that's right. This is what I see that's wrong. And so when the movie comes out, I hope we'll all enjoy it, but this is what I'm seeing so far. Now, who knew that we'd all be waiting as we have been. Right. But so mainly it's just another channel for the podcast, but it's also a place where once in a while, if I have something else I want to convey, that I put it out. But also, sometimes I just take raw video I have from my career, and I'll just put it on there without music, without editing, just raw flying footage. And people seem to appreciate that too.
Since we're talking about Top Gun Maverick, I just got some intel upstairs at the Bug Roach mixer. So as we're talking here, the Bug Roach mixer is going on above us, which is why we've got to expedite ending this so we can get back up there. But what I hear, this is Gouge in addition to what you've done with that episode and what I did with in fact, Jell-O's like, you should try to do this, your own version of that. You actually said that, and so I was like, okay, yeah, so I tried one too. That got demonetized right away, because Paramount, if you use any of the trailer, they're gonna take it. But she says that they use not the iBar itself, but a replica, and they call it the hard deck. That is the new Miramar O Club in this movie. She said she can neither confirm nor deny that Penny Benjamin is the owner of this bar, which you've heard in circulation, and so she's played by, who's the actress that plays her? I'm blanking. Jennifer Connelly plays Penny Benjamin. We've guessed that, or at least I guessed on my version of that she's the love interest, but she says she can confirm, although she signed some kind of an NDA or something. But anyway, that's just some detail as we try to figure out what this movie's about that. Another thing that all three of us have in common is DCS. And again, you and your consortium called BVR Productions, and some of those guys are out here. In fact, you guys are co-located for the first time ever in some ways, right? These guys are out here.
So this is Tailhook 2021, and we used the opportunity to have an off-site for our team. And we're here to talk about what we do with DCS, as well as the podcast, partners like yourself. And so, yeah, we're just using it as a chance to really talk about how can we continue to serve people with military aviation content.
We're working on one of his scenarios.
This is Raven 1 Dominant Fury, and this is a prequel to Flip Wilson's memorable events in Raven 1. This is when he's a junior department head. It takes place in the Eastern Mediterranean, and so we use the map that the DCS players use, that they like to use, and we've made up a story, and it's a lot different than Raven 1. With Raven 1, initially after about 3 years the book was out, and I'd be getting these reviews on Amazon, hey, this is great for DCS players. Oh, what is DCS? So I found out that there's this community of guys that have Hornet cockpits in their basements, and they're really into it, and they love the detail found in Raven 1. And so I was contacted in Jell-O, and we set out to making it.
And so Jell-O introduced me to what it is too, and so we're working with Baltic Dragon. I don't know if it's legal to say his name.
Absolutely.
So Baltic Dragon is here. came in from Brussels, and so it's the first time I've met him in person. Had you met him in person before this?
No.
Not
Yeah.
until this.
So he's a super cool guy,
Yeah.
you know? He's the mystery man behind this version of DCS, because I guess there's Heat Blur is a different version of DCS, or what are the different parts of DCS, the
Think
DCS
of
ecosystem?
Digital Combat Simulator, as the platform, and then people can come on like Heat Blur or Baltic Dragon and create universes, if you will, that work within that platform. And so Heat Blur comes up with the F-14, for example. Baltic Dragon, in cooperation with Kevin Miller and BVR Productions, has adapted his book Raven 1 to a campaign that you can buy and play and enjoy. And so for folks who enjoy Digital Combat Simulator and have the requisite system at home, they can play and follow the book very closely. And for us, it's a way that we can continue to do what we enjoy doing, which is offer an authentic, realistic view, if you will, of military aviation to the public, because it's not like what you see in Hollywood a lot of times. Hollywood has a role to play, and that's fine, but it's not always realistic. And so that's what we try to do in our shows, that's what you try to do in your books, and that's what we try to do in our DCS campaigns.
So I remember when you teased out some footage on Facebook of what Raven 1 looked like. I remember watching that and just going, holy smokes, this is realistic.
Yes.
You know, I had no idea the resolution, the detail, so forth and so on. So that was my first exposure to DCS. And then talking to Jell-O and now being involved in you know, what could be potentially my version of the game going forward out next year. I'll also, for my viewers, say that I'm the voice of CAG in the new Raven version. I'm so excited to do that. But there's a lot, like Jell-O was saying, there's a lot that goes into this. And we pride ourselves on the accuracy, the authenticity, and so that's what BVR and the Baltic Dragon side of the house brings to the equation. I'm happy to have been invited by Jell-O to join, and it's really cool to meet the BVR team in person and to meet Baltic Dragon in person, who's an awesome guy. Just sort of, you feel that kinship right away. So I'm very excited about that. So it's great to see you guys in person, and it's great to connect here at Tailhook, and Tailhook is always that kind of a thing. We missed it last year. We are using masks just so Chaser doesn't get pissed at us. I'm drinking, so I'm allowed to not have
We're
my
all
mask on.
armed
We're all
properly.
yeah.
I don't have one, so I will mask back up if we're done.
Yeah. So thank you guys. Always good to see you.
You too.
Jell-O, good
Thanks,
to see
Vince.
you. All right, that'll do it for this episode. I look forward to talking to you guys again soon.